Hello, everyone, and welcome to TEDxCivic Exchange. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Natalie, and I'm incredibly excited to be moderating our discussion on how energy and tech are disrupting climate change now. And if I can invite all of our speakers to turn on their video. Today, as we enter the milestone of less than a decade until the 2030 UN Sustainable Development Goals, a recent study by HKUST has shown that Hong Kongers actually quite value environmental protection, specifically when it comes to energy consumption and waste. In this exciting landscape, how can we ensure that we are well positioned to accelerate and scale innovative energy solutions that have proven to work? And joining us today are three esteemed speakers, Brandon Ng, Christina Tang, and Manav Gupta. Brandon is co-founder and CEO of Amped Energy, a company driven by its vision of creating an emission-free future for construction. Amped Energy pioneered the use of energy storage systems in urban construction through its core product, the Entertainer, which currently powers a wide number of high-profile construction projects locally, all without the need for diesel, and has already had an air pollution impact of removing 10,000 cars from the roads. The company is scaling and will be expanding internationally in 2021. Brandon holds a degree in chemical engineering from Imperial College London and is a Forbes Asia 30 Under 30 honoree. Joining us also is Christina, Director of Blue Sky Energy Technology. Blue Sky specializes in integrating sensors, data, and end users' behavioral change solutions for buildings to improve their energy usage and indoor environmental performance. They are providing services to over 200 locations in Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Beijing. Right now, Christina also serves in the Energy Advisory Committee and Advisory Council on the Environment of Hong Kong. Previously, Christina worked as a management consultant with Bain & Company and as a global fellow with Acumen. She's a graduate from Brown University and pursuing a master's degree in high performance building. And joining us from the perspective of venture capital and accelerators that fuel these energy companies, we have Manav Gupta, founder and CEO of Brinc, which is a different breed of venture capital and accelerator firm. Core to Brinc's business is their belief that some of the world's biggest challenges can be solved by entrepreneurs, who Brinc likes to call game changers, who can fundamentally change how we move, what we eat, how we feel, and where we live for the better. Brandon, Christina, Manav, welcome to the panel today. Really excited to have you here. Today, with this wealth of expertise, insights, and perspectives, we will cover a range of local energy innovations and their potential, from the larger industrial scale to the individual level, from manufacturing and the supply chain to energy efficiency in institutional buildings and the construction process, to the impact of collectively incorporating plant-based diets. We'll be talking about the current landscape of innovations in energy in Hong Kong, the city's greatest challenges and potential solutions, and what I find most exciting, the practical recommendations for companies and individual consumers for disrupting climate change. We do want this session to be interactive, so we will have a Q&A portion towards the end. That being said, please feel free to type in your questions at the Q&A box at any moment during the session. We will be collecting and monitoring the questions during the session. And without further ado, I would like to invite our speakers to share some of their insights and share how their work currently relates to disrupting climate change. So Brandon, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Natalie, for the stage, and thank you very much, TEDx and Civic Exchange, for having me on tonight. My name is Brandon. I'm one of the founders of this company here in Hong Kong called Amped Energy. We've been around for about 6 years, but it's only really been in the past 2 years that we've really hit our stride. Next slide, please. I call Amped Energy a vision driven company because we focus on one thing and one thing alone, and that is how we can create an emission-free future for construction. This is so important to us because according to the International Energy Agency, in the next 40 years, we're going to be building 2.5 trillion square feet of new buildings. That's a new Paris every single week for the next 40 years. And if we can't find a way to do this sustainably, the world's going to have a big problem. And next slide, please. Today, we are quite far away from that because energy in the construction sector is almost entirely delivered by diesel and diesel generators. Now, the problems with these are well known. They're really noisy, which means you have limited construction hours. You need to refuel them and need to maintain them, and you have to take them down whenever you're doing that. They use diesel, and there are sort of flammability, fire, and ground pollution risks associated with the use of diesel. There's absolutely no data transparency that comes with these devices. They're almost always fully analog. But what we care about a lot is the fact that they're heavy polluters. Every single diesel generator in the construction sector produces anywhere from 100 to 200 tons of carbon dioxide every single year, and that's obviously contributed to the climate crisis that we're in today. And every generator also produces lots and lots of diesel fumes, NOx, PM, SO2, and that affects the air that we breathe in. So it produces air pollution that you can see all around the world, especially in cities. Next slide, please. So we really started thinking about whether there was a solution to this. And this really started when, about 3 years ago, when we were approached by Gammon Construction, one of the largest construction companies here in Hong Kong, with a challenge. And that challenge was whether it was possible to take the batteries that we had at that point in time and use them to power up an entire construction projects. And we kind of laughed it off at first, thinking it was a silly idea, but Gammon insisted that we look into it a little bit more. And the more we did that, the more we looked into it, the more we started to realize, one, not only was it technically possible to power up a construction project with batteries instead of diesel, two, we saw that it would address every single operational issue that you had with generators, the noise, the pollution, the carbon footprint, the cost, the diesel hazards, all that goes away. Three, we saw that no one else in the world really was trying to do this. And four, we realized we could do it in a way that was economically interesting for Gammon, our customer at that point in time, and economically interesting for ourselves. And this really led to the development of the Entertainer, which is actually the world's first energy storage system that's designed specifically for the needs of construction projects. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, the Entertainer addresses every single operational issue that you have with generators. It's nearly silent. There's minimal downtime when it comes to maintenance, and it recharges itself automatically. So there's no downtime for recharging the battery system. It doesn't use diesel at all, meaning there are no diesel hazards, no diesel fire hazards, no ground pollution hazards associated with the use of the Entertainer. It's a fully digital internet connected device that provides immense levels of data transparency, not just of the Entertainer itself, but of the equipment that's connected to it. And that provides a level of insight to construction companies that they've never had before. But the key point here is the Entertainer has a carbon footprint that is 85% less compared to a diesel generator. And that 15%, the Entertainer doesn't actually produce any emissions. It's a big battery. That 15% is the electricity that's needed to recharge the Entertainer and the carbon footprint associated with generating that electricity. So even then, when accounting for that, the carbon footprint of the Entertainer is 85% less. And as the grid all around the world gets cleaner and cleaner with the adoption of renewable energy, that is just going to grow. And obviously, because it's a big battery system, there are no diesel fumes to speak of. Absolutely no NOx, no PM, no SO2. Even if you account for the fumes which are produced by a power company, the reduction in these is 99.99% less compared to a diesel generator. So massive improvements from both a carbon and also from an air pollution standpoint. Next slide, please. So ever since we deployed the first unit with Gammon in October 2019, we've actually started deploying a whole bunch more units across numerous construction sites all over Hong Kong. We had actually wanted to expand internationally just a couple of months ago. Coronavirus actually put a stop to that, so we decided to focus our efforts on Hong Kong. Next slide, please. So over the past year or so, we have delivered, or we have on order, a total of 34 units. Across the units that we have already deployed, we've a total fleet-wide operating time of 8.3 years. Our fleet-wide reliability is over 99.9%, so we're way more reliable than a generator. And we have been working with numerous construction companies all over Hong Kong, basically the largest construction companies that do massive construction projects. You can be pretty sure that they either already have an entertainer here in Hong Kong, or they're in the process of getting them. So we have 14 different major construction companies on top of Gammon that are now using our products. And the most, I guess, rewarding thing is having customers come back to you saying, we love your product so much, we want to get more. So we've got 4 repeat customers so far. These are the customers that have had the units for long enough that they actually decide they want more. There are over 20, in fact, we're coming up to 30 different entertainer-powered construction projects here in Hong Kong. Across the units that we've deployed, we've eliminated the equivalent of 2,800 tons. That's not kilograms, that's tons of carbon every single year. And that number is just going up as we deploy more and more units. And the air pollution impact, it's actually, this is slightly out of date, it's coming close to 10,000 cars that we've taken off the roads in terms of the air pollution impact so far with the 34 units that we've deployed. If you could hit right. But so far, we're barely scratching the surface. We have a 0.9% market share here in Hong Kong. So we've barely begun, and there's so much more that we still want to do here in Hong Kong. And the impact that this technology could have on not just carbon footprint, but on air quality is ginormous, as these numbers highlight. Next slide, please. And I wanted to just, I guess, end my presentation on a bit of a positive note, which is, this is a picture of about 1 million people, right? And here in Hong Kong, according to the Environmental Protection Department, there are a total of 3,890 diesel generators that are being used by the construction sector. This is actually a public database that everyone has access to. And every single generator that we take off is equivalent to us removing 200 to 400 cars off the roads. So 3,900 generators, 200 to 400 cars on the roads. You do the math, so if we replace every single generator here in Hong Kong, that would have the same air quality impact as removing nearly 1 million cars from the roads. This is a picture of 1 million people. Imagine what 1 million cars looks like. And we're only just getting started here in Hong Kong. We are expanding internationally now as a company. So we're very, very proud to be taking the Hong Kong brand. We are a Hong Kong company, and we want to be taking the Hong Kong brand and Hong Kong technology and Hong Kong innovation global. So that's what we're doing at Amped Energy. My contact details are at the bottom of the slide. Feel free, I mean, I'm more than happy to take questions in this panel, but if you'd like to get in touch with me directly, please feel free to send me an email. Thank you ever so much. Back to you, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Brandon. This is incredibly exciting. And just thinking about that figure that you noted, right? Every week there's a new Paris being built. So, we don't really think about it every single day, but construction is just such an industry with such huge impact. And not only, we can really feel the daily impacts in Hong Kong too, right? Every day you would most likely walk past a construction site in Hong Kong. So thank you so much for that. And it's really exciting to see this local solution. And next, I would also like to invite Christina, who's also working on a local solution, to share your work and how it relates to disrupting climate change with energy and tech. Christina, over to you.
Sure. Thanks so much, Natalie. And it's amazing to hear about your update, Brandon. Blue Sky, like Amped Energy, is also a local startup innovation. At Blue Sky, we really focus on building sustainable communities, starting with smart buildings. From day one, our focus is to empower people to change their behaviors. And so today I would like to share with you our journey of doing so. And yeah, let's get started to the next slide. In Hong Kong, as most of you might know, building is the single largest source of carbon emission. Actually, 60% of our city's carbon emission comes from building. That's enormous because, as you can imagine, transportation, waste, and others are only, occupying about 30% of our emission. And what's more is we spend 90% of our time indoor. So building is home to us, either, in terms of our time in office or our time at home. Buildings are what makes us healthy or sick. And buildings are also what will contribute a lot to global climate change. So at Blue Sky, what we try to do is to try to change people's behavior and to defy this gravity of energy usage. Because I would imagine all of you have that experience of, oh, it's such a hot day. I'll go home, switch on all of my aircon. And when it's cold, I would rather put on more sweaters than to turn off or turn down, my AC. And so what we do is really to defy this gravity. And it's really hard because changing behaviors is something that requires consistent reminders. And we're really excited because we have been starting to see some successful cases. Next slide. So since 2014, we started out with a pilot in University of Hong Kong, engaging just a few fulls of university students. And today, we are now in over 200 locations in Hong Kong. We have deployed over 20,000 sensors all over Hong Kong with not only university clients, but expanded recently to property, also to different kinds of social organizations. And we're very excited because through all of these collective efforts of people every day in over 200 locations, we've managed to reduce over 1,000 tons of carbon emission. And that's equivalent to planting 16,000 of trees. I would like to share with you more in terms of how we do it. Of course, we still face a lot of challenges, but this is how we do it. Next slide. How we do it is we basically provide real-time transparency with different kinds of Internet of Things sensors, which are connected to the internet. So previously, 1 kilowatt hour to us is very abstract. If I ask you, oh, what is 1 kilowatt hour? I think it's really hard to answer. After doing a few years on this project, I realized that, 1 kilowatt hour of energy usage is actually equivalent to about 1 hour of my air conditioning use. It's also equivalent to actually charging 100 iPhones. And what's really interesting is, for example, if I want to save this 1 kilowatt hour, what can I do? If I use electricity fan instead of my air conditioning, I can actually power up over 20 electricity fan if I, use it to for 1 hour instead of one AC. So these are the data that we provide to the end users. And in addition, we also provide them with real-time reminders and predictions so that they know what their space's energy usage and indoor air quality is like. Instead of receiving a bill surprise at the end of a month, telling you, oh, you've used 20% more energy, where does it go? We can really pinpoint exactly what time, what appliances have consumed how much of energy. And lastly, we also enable our users with different kinds of smart controls, so it's easier to control different energy. Next slide. So this is the interface that we have built to enable our users to better visualize their energy usage. Actually, the two utility companies in Hong Kong are going to replace all of Hong Kong traditional meters with smart meters in the coming 7 years. For our corporate clients, we have gone one step ahead of time. Instead of just telling you what is your total consumption, we go down to the detail level of different appliances. Splitting your energy usage, particularly into air conditioning, lighting versus socket load. We also integrate indoor air quality levels for our users so they can easily view, oh, what's my indoor air quality score in accordance to some complicated standards by World Health Organization as well as the Environmental Protection Department. And so with this dashboard, we actually provide real-time interventions into hundreds of buildings around Hong Kong every day, so people can save energy easier, as well as have a better transparency of their indoor air quality during 90% of their time in the office or in their own residential places. Next slide. So with indoor air quality, it's something that is tricky, especially it's like energy. It's something that is not visible to our eyes. And sometimes when entering into a building, we might feel dizzy, but after leaving the building, we feel better. So that is actually a syndrome that has been coined by the World Health Organization as sick building syndrome. It's actually a phenomenon that is very popular based on a local university research. People realize that over 80% of the occupants feel some levels of discomfort whenever they're in a building area. So with real-time visualization, we're able to tell our users what are the particular zones in a building with air quality which are subpar. And how can we do things, for example, removing sources of pollutants, increasing ventilation or increasing purification to ensure that the indoor air quality is ventilated well to prevent any cross contagions or prolonged exposure to poor air quality. And what's really interesting is with good air quality, we can usually save energy as well, because air conditioning is the largest source of energy consumption in Hong Kong, and a lot of spaces are actually overcooled. So if we can increase the temperature into the comfortable range, we can actually save significant amount of energy. Next slide. And as I've mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, our work is really hard because it's defying the gravity of our existing behaviors. And we have also faced a lot of skepticism throughout the years, including the difficulty of engaging people to change their behaviors, to participate in something that is beyond their immediate convenience or comfort. And we're very encouraged usually by our end users sharing, especially, for example, by some of our end users in the university. They really have a lasting behavioral change. I still remember this student who graduated from Hong Kong U, and she's currently working in the financial sector. And she shared with me that no matter what she is going to do, be it related to the environment or not, she believed that the data transparency has really helped her to form her behavior and make more proper decisions, informed decisions in the future. That is not about whether this will make her more money or not, but this is simply because of a responsible behavior of safeguarding our environmental resources for a sustainable future. And so that is our core mission. We really hope to create lasting behavioral change through technology, through data, with people in the center of our solutions, because we believe that people are centric to solving this global problem. And last but not least, thank you for your time. Next slide. This is my personal information as well as our contact. I look forward to hearing from you and staying in touch. Thank you, Natalie. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Christina. And as you were speaking, I actually reached over and and turned off my aircon. And yeah, I mean, I actually didn't know that air conditioning was the biggest source of energy consumption in Hong Kong. But when I think about it, it makes sense. And I think what really stands out to me in your solution is the way you really center it around the people and the behavior and what it takes to put into education and to change mindsets, which is something I hope that we will have more opportunity to discuss further as well. And now I am excited to invite Manav to give your perspective from a slightly different angle, which is, you know, coming from as a VC, as an accelerator who supports these change makers or game changers, like you say, such as Brandon and Christina. What is your perspective on disrupting climate change with energy and tech? So Manav, over to you.
Thank you very much, Natalie, and super exciting to see the work that Brandon and Christina are doing. especially since these are, homegrown entrepreneurs and homegrown solutions, which is super exciting because I think that's the best way to truly understand what the real problems are. So at Brinc, we're very strong believers that, the world has been designed by people no smarter than us or anyone here on this panel or anyone who's watching. We think that everyone's done the best job they can, and they've tried their best to build a better future. They've made the best decisions they could, and a lot of those decisions, unfortunately, have not had maybe the data that's available to us today, or the insights, or the foresight, or the leveling, or the layering of the required, sets of data that ultimately help us define what it is to build not only a better solution, but a more sustainable solution. So I think today, we're finally at a point where we have the tools, we have the insights, we have the learnings, we have the foundations to build on, and we are given an opportunity to build and create entire new systemic change, entire new revolutions, and there's a lot of problems left to solve. So we really believe it's with us. And as we started thinking about this, we thought about what was the best way to really drive impact and solve problems. And we thought about ways that we could do that, which could, in the beginning, I was thinking about building our own businesses, venture building. We thought about working with the government to change policies. We thought about different ways to drive consumer change by pushing consumer behavior. We thought about working with corporates to help give them advice and drive awareness and help push their initiatives. Or we thought about other ways, which is let's just slow down as a society, which we really don't think is going to happen. So ultimately, what we kind of ended up on was, the real and the best solution we believe is driving change by building businesses. We think it's the most effective and scalable way to solve the world's largest problems. We think it's the best way to also drive returns, and we think if we can find a balance between profit and purpose, we can truly drive long-term sustainable change. And we believe the way to do that is by empowering game changers like Brandon and Christina and many others all around the world that are trying their best to solve, sometimes very small to very large problems. So we're super excited about this. We've been doing this for a few years. Maybe you can just jump to the next slide. We started here in Hong Kong in 2014. We're now about 80 people across 8 locations. So we've grown, the office and presence and support from Hong Kong to multiple locations. We've invested today in a little over 150 companies. And we run 11 specialized accelerator programs across different horizontals and verticals, including IoT, health tech, med tech, agri-food tech, as well as clean energy. And as Natalie, as you mentioned in the beginning, our goal is to help improve how we feel, where we live, what we eat, and how we move. We work very closely with corporates to help drive this change. Perhaps you can just jump to the next slide. So in a nutshell, our role is to identify companies early and then put them through structured vertical focus accelerator programs and connect them early with corporates who we believe are the avenues and channels, very similar to Brandon working with large energy companies or construction companies here. It's about finding ways to connect and enable growth and distribution through these sort of broader channels and outlets that are available from large corporates. We do that through POC programs. We do that by facilitating early engagement, by running workshops and seminars, as well as inviting corporate innovation heads to our accelerators to help facilitate awareness of where the real problems are, how they're thinking about addressing those solutions, and hopefully bridging the gap and finding that win-win for early to later stage companies to facilitate real engagement and drive impact. Next slide. One of the groups that we've worked with last year that we've built a relationship with is Schneider Electric. We worked with Schneider Electric to help identify ways to support the sourcing and identification of founders who were building energy efficient solutions or energy efficiency focused solutions. Schneider had a lot of strength in energy distribution, energy financing, et cetera, but wanted to invest heavily into energy efficiency. We helped identify 150 companies around the world, put them through due diligence, and ultimately accepted 2 companies. One being Mata Analytics, which is a super exciting, AI-based software that helps new folks who are looking to build energy projects, properly understand their financials and project out cash flows and kind of understand cost and benefits, while looking at not just the power markets, process engineering, looking at the financial expertise and risk mitigations, as they're looking to basically build an effective and financially efficient solution, as well as Avrio Energy, which ultimately helps plug in the retail industry to identify what are the 20% of applications that, if reduced or managed, can help reduce 80% of the impact. And I think for us, as we look at efficiency, efficiency usually comes in the form of new tech or innovation, or comes in the form of reducing waste, which is very similar, reducing energy waste, which is very similar to reducing food waste. So we're excited to continue to work with great companies around the world and help them properly interface with corporate leaders like Schneider Electric and many others, who are excited to truly find new ways to drive innovation. Last slide. So I thought I'd throw in something to just kind of lighten the mood. This was actually shared on my family group yesterday, and I think it's an interesting. If you guys want, I'll just spend a minute and read that. So I thought this was interesting because it really does truly foreshadow, I think, the need of the hour here, and the need of the hour right now in our view is really compassion. And I think it's understanding that every action has a reaction, and that action and reaction isn't connected just to your own world, but also the planet around us. And I think that all sentient beings, dogs, animals, humans, cockroaches, etc., are all fairly compassionate. And this myth of dog eat dog isn't really our true nature. So I think as we start thinking about, what's the best way to kind of address these challenges that we face, we really need to reflect on what's important and operate from a position of compassion, as individuals as well as from our environment. Because I think if we, see how this plays across, for example, food, if we do operate from a place of compassion, not only will we be able to push behavior change, but as a result of pushing behavior change, drive real energy and thus climate impact. So I think this is kind of an umbrella topic, and it's exciting to hopefully continue to start thinking about our own actions and what we can do as we start thinking about more climate friendly daily actions.
Thank you so much, Manav. I just love this comic so much, especially because I'm obsessed with dogs. And this also reminds me of, I was just reading organizational psychologist Professor Adam Grant's book, Give and Take. And he highlights that, going back to Manav, you were talking about the myth of having to go with dog eat dog in this world in order to succeed. But really, when we think about the values that we actually desire in people we work with is actually exactly the values that we have here, right? Compassion, loyalty, duty, empathy, care. And what a timely moment to think about this in history, right? Not only are we, as I mentioned at the opening of the session, 10 years towards the Sustainable Development Goals that we want to reach. At the same time, this year, COVID has also given us the opportunity to reflect and build back better, right? What people are calling the Great Reset. So this is why it's just extraordinary to be able to be here with all of you today to talk about this. And going back to TEDxCivic Exchange and how it links back to the global dialogue of TEDx Countdown, which wants to highlight all of these local solutions all around the world and how to scale them and connect them with global trends. It's really extraordinary that we have such an amazing local homegrown group here. So now I would love to start a more interactive discussion. And just to begin with, in the context of your work, how has the landscape of energy innovation in Hong Kong really developed over the last 5 years? And maybe, Brandon, you can start.
I think Hong Kong, for the most part is, everyone in Hong Kong for the most part is a consumer of energy. And I think there's over the past couple of years, I think there is an increasing awareness of how our behavioral patterns, I'm talking more macro as opposed to specific to AMP, how our behavioral patterns has an impact on how we use energy and the wider impact that that use of energy has on the environment. I think that has happened through, through no small part through a lot of campaigning from the various government departments, especially the EPD. It's also through guys like Civic Exchange, and it's also companies like Christina's and the utility companies. So I think there's been a lot more awareness of how the consumption of energy impacts the environment. In terms of actual innovation itself, I'll be honest, there's limited innovation within the energy space in Hong Kong, because ultimately, aside from what Christina is doing, I think Christina is doing an amazing job, which is monitoring and measuring and controlling the use of energy through behavioral change. Energy ultimately is a physical thing. It has to be physically delivered. So there is some physical mechanism that's going to be required. I think Hong Kong has focused a lot, especially on software, and I think there aren't too many companies that do the hardware side of things like we do. Hardware is hard. That's my view. I don't know if Christina and Manav, you have a different view on that.
Christina, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the past few years have been really exciting. We have seen a lot of green movements coming to really like headlines and popular trends of, for example, future meat replacing meat. We've also seen more shops opening up, which discourage packaging. I think all those are really exciting, and of course, seeing like renewable energy, clean energy supply sources and innovations like Brandon's. I think those are really exciting improvement. But I do see the lack of real deep-rooted value change. And I think that is what is needed in our society. Environmental or sustainability is still being seen as a nice to have, a good to have. Whenever it touches upon the issue of whether I will have to pay more or if it will inconvenience me, then people will say no. And I think that's the fundamental change that we still need to push for. Ultimately, climate change is not only an environmental external issue. I think it is a moral value issue. If we are not being proper, responsible in our environmental and our stewardship of resources, we're actually removing the rights of future generations to live in this earth as we have lived in today, with clean air, with clean water, etc. So it's actually a violence done to future generation. But I think this concept is still very remote to many of us. And that is something that we really need to see happening right now.
Definitely. And, like that whole mindset change from an option to a need or a mandate, and even thinking in terms of, for people who might see it as a moral value, but might believe they do not have perhaps the financial means to make more environmentally friendly choices, for example, how can we, as Manav was saying, shift the system such that it actually benefits everyone, even when they seem to be only thinking about their own interest, to make this change, right? So Manav, what do you think in terms of your own work? How has the landscape developed over the last 5 years?
Well, maybe I can answer that question around what are the things we can do. We in terms of the landscape changing, I think we're seeing a lot more companies being born in Hong Kong, which is exciting. We've obviously tried our best to bring in international game changers and bring them to Hong Kong and help them recognize the potential of leveraging the supply chains in China and leveraging the supply chains and infrastructure from a connected hardware perspective. I think the domestic innovation is still fairly limited, and I think the government, let's say the early stage VC, the early stage policies and support are not in place today to facilitate enabling the grants that are required, or the cost coverage that is required for the risk at the early stage from a business building perspective. I think if we jump to the second part, which is really around how do you identify as an end consumer, what are the things that you can do to be more impactful in Hong Kong? I think there's a lot, like very simple things like, we're obviously moving online to purchase a lot of clothes, but when you do purchase those clothes, if the clothes don't fit, for example, the return, there's obviously, I think when we think about energy, we should think about energy in its applications, and there's so many ways energy is utilized. So the trucks that deliver the goods to you, when you return those goods, how they're then recycled, what happens, the water, the energy attached to that. And I think there's interesting opportunities there. We're looking to invest in a company that's hoping to take returns from a perspective of instead of having them to be returned to the U.S., they could be recycled or resold domestically as they're not used. I think the overall meat and plant-based diets, there's huge opportunities there. Obviously, producing animals requires a lot of space, land, and water, and it's highly energy inefficient. And Hong Kong over the last few years has had actually an increase in growth, and it's one of the largest consumers of meat. It's also one of the largest importers of meat, with kind of Brazilian beef topping those imports, which has a major environmental footprint and also a lot of water usage. I think there could be opportunities to introduce almost meat taxes and find ways to have Hong Kong be a more resilient player by being more active and being plant-based. I think everything that Christina mentioned around reducing air conditioner usage, obviously, refrigerants and air conditioning usage are top 5 areas globally that contribute to carbons. Looking at conscious brands and even companies trying to find ways to reward good behavior. One of the things we do is we only allow team members to expense plant-based meals. We don't allow expenses for meat. Maybe ways to allow people to work from home, or rewarding them for taking the trains versus other means. Public transport here is incredible. So I think there's just a lot of, hopefully consumer-led behaviors here also that can be enabled.
Thank you, Manav. That's very exciting, especially the different examples that you've pointed out, looking at how consumers can really lead this change. And, taking a step back, I also want to highlight that point you said about, one of the greatest challenge in Hong Kong for change and progress right now is, when we're thinking about businesses that are really leading the solutions, the lack of risk capital, or the lack of government policies that enable a thriving environment for businesses like that. So Christina and Brandon, I would also love to hear from you. What do you see as the greatest challenge in Hong Kong for this type of industry level change towards sustainable energy? And maybe Christina, you can start.
Yes, sure. I think there has been a lot of really good progress. In Hong Kong, for example, there are over, I think, 10,000 applications to use renewable energy on their rooftops all around Hong Kong. So that was not, 2 years ago, if you told me, there will be over 10,000 people who wanted to put solar panels on their rooftop, that will be something that I think that is a very bullish. But now today, it's happening, and it's because of good policy. Feed-in tariff has been introduced in Hong Kong, and it really encourages people to consider renewable energy. But I think we need a full suite of tools to support that. So solar panel has reached grid parity already, meaning that producing a kilowatt hour of energy from solar panel is as cheap, if not cheaper, than buying electricity from the grid. What we need is to loosen up certain regulations and red tapes around where we can install these kind of renewable energy equipments or different kinds of energy saving equipments. So there should be kind of a loosening up of policy or regulations to encourage more adoptions of technologies which are revolutionary. And really thinking beyond just the default mode of massive infrastructure, but changing it to maybe more democratizing the supply and the demand of energy And there can be so many things that can be done with decentralization of electricity supply. Everyone can choose where their energy supply comes from. And then with each consumer making a decision slowly and gradually, a fossil fuel powered grid can slowly be changed into a clean and a renewable one. And of course, we have to couple that with the demand side, with the behaviors as well. As you increase clean energy supply and you reduce the demand, then there will be a chance for us to hit net zero emission. So I think it's on both sides, we need to consider that.
Thank you, Christina. And I think what really stands out to me here is that the idea of a decentralized electricity. I would love to learn more about that maybe. I mean, I could talk like for hours about that. So Brandon, what are your thoughts? The greatest challenge towards industry level change?
I think policy. I think policies obviously have a huge impact, but at AMPT, we really don't build our business around any kind of government policy or subsidy, because I don't think that's the way to build a business. I really think it's down to especially in Hong Kong, where it's pretty laissez-faire in terms of the way the Hong Kong government operates, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, right? I think the approach that we've taken is to a certain extent very similar to the approach that Tesla takes, which is we admit the fact that most people don't care about the environment. It's changing, but most people don't care. And what do they care about? So with a car, what do people care about? They care about, they want a great car. They want a car to be fun, which means it's fast, it's got to be good looking, it's got to be safe, it's got to be practical, it's got to have a lot of luggage capacity. That's what people want. And the question is then, most people, aren't going to buy a car just because it's green, right? So I think it's up to businesses to try to figure out how to align those two things, to align the fact that you want to be making the best possible product, a car, for example, with the fact that that best possible product also so happens to be green. And that's kind of the approach that we've taken at AMPT, which is we want to build the best possible energy system for the construction sector. And it so happens to be green. But the construction sector, let's be honest, doesn't really care about the environment more than, I'm overgeneralizing here, doesn't care more than what they're required to do from a statutory standpoint. So it's about how do you create a product that's way better than the status quo, but also so happens to be green. And if we can do that, the interests are completely aligned. So it's got to be cheaper, it's got to be cleaner, it's got to be quieter, it's got to be more data rich, it's got to be smaller, it's got to be safer, it's got to be less work required. And that's kind of the approach that we've taken at AMPT, where we built an incredible product that happens to be green, as opposed to be a green product that's okay. Right. I think that's the approach to take. So I buy into what Manav says, which is it's down to businesses, it's down to entrepreneurs. So how do you support entrepreneurs in order for entrepreneurs to make that impact?
Definitely. And going back to what Christina was saying about the mindset too, right? And this idea is just really extraordinary to me. Making it not an alternative you have to choose because you want to be environmentally friendly and disrupt climate change, but rather it's simply the better product. And I see that we already have quite a few audience questions coming in, which is exciting. So if you have any questions, please continue to typing them in. But before we jump into the audience Q&A, I also want to take some time to highlight any success stories in this space that you would like to share, whether it's in your own work or in elsewhere that you've seen. Manav, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we have a lot of exciting companies, and we obviously love all of our family members and investments equally. But there's a lot of great work that's happening across the board. And as I think about ag tech or the kind of broader agricultural space, there's a lot of companies. One that comes to mind is Lavatech, that's focused on finding ways to reduce energy usage in vertical farming. as well as across the agricultural system. So I think that's quite exciting, because there's very clear, not just trying to make more sustainable foods, but build them in a more efficient manner. Another company that comes to mind is Infliction Labs. They are automated robotics for solar panel cleaning. So, obviously one of the issues, especially in developing markets where infrastructure is not there, there's also a lot of deaths attached when people are looking to clean solar panels. So by putting robotics in that can, navigate different types of panels and kind of configure and clean, all the studies point to almost 40% of energy being lost because of dust on solar panels. So by being able to automate the cleaning process in a more integrated way, we're excited about that. We're super excited about all the stuff we continue to see happening in the cultured and plant-based meat space, as there's major energy reduction by building more sustainable foods, which is connected to the trucking, the cold storage, the transport, the land usage, the feed stock, all of it. So, and we have a lot of, we made about 25 investments in the last 2 years in that space. And as we start thinking about lab-grown meats and the potential there, to Brendan's point, if we cannot get the product to taste the same and or better and be at a lower cost long term, these just will not get adopted. I think this group and more groups, especially younger groups, as they get more aware, are driving the change and are more cognizant and are ready to make improvements without just on the pure basis of the understanding of the problem, whereas the majority in mass market still need a better product, a better solution, and that's one of the things we have to continue to invest into.
Definitely. And Christina, Brandon, feel free to jump in here as well.
I mean, for me, the one thing that I think has been an outstanding success story here in Hong Kong is the adoption of electric vehicles. There's a Tesla every single corner right now in Hong Kong, and yes, a big part of it was the subsidies that were provided up until I think it was 2017. When that got pulled. I mean, I've got a couple of my colleagues are actually ex-Tesla, so we talk about this all the time. But Tesla has built a product now that is price competitive with a gas car. It's way more fun, it's way faster, it's incredibly safe, it's incredibly practical, the Tesla Model 3. And even with minimal subsidies, there's substantial adoption of the Model 3. And so I think, Hong Kong has been, in this region, a standout success in terms of the adoption. Obviously, Hong Kong doesn't produce electric cars, but in terms of the adoption and use of electric vehicles, it's certainly leading in Asia. If you look at any other major city in Asia, Hong Kong is very much a leader in that.
Yeah, definitely. I think a success case that we've seen is actually one of our clients. They are a landlord, and they started to provide this to engage their tenants to save energy. And I think what is successful is that from just a first pilot program, they have actually launched that, and it's now cross-border. So not only in Hong Kong, but being able to also export this back to mainland China, and expanding kind of their service to their tenants through green initiatives, sustainable initiatives. So to us, I think it's very encouraging, because traditionally, like there is kind of a bad taste to landlord or property developers. Like they're being seen as like, someone who maximize profit, who charge as much rent as they can. But now we're starting to see that they will provide sustainable services to their tenants to encourage them to save energy, and it's something that can also be exported to somewhere beyond Hong Kong. And so I just am very happy about it, because I think Hong Kong in this past year has been through a lot of challenges and troubles, and we're also kind of being seen as a laggard, in the global innovation platform. We're being seen as like, very backwards, conservative, only talking about finance all the time. So I think that's something that is important, that we can actually, when there's a good service, good innovation, is something that can be beyond Hong Kong, and also assisting our clients to transform their traditional way of doing business into something that is really more mutual and kind of like bringing the SDG, the SDG goals back into the formula. It's not only about maximizing profit, it's also about achieving all these SDGs at the same time.
But imagine if you could maximize profits by emphasizing SDGs and actually doing something about it, right? So I mean, that's the game changer, which is aligning interests. If the most profitable route for these property developers is to care about the SDGs and do something about them, that's the path they're naturally going to take. So if we, I think it's down to entrepreneurs like yourself, Christina, and myself, and all the companies that Manav has been investing in to get those incentives aligned, right?
Definitely, and you're spot on, Brandon, because I think the financial circle is coming to this. The loan, which are certified as a green loan, has a lower interest rate than traditional loan. And so you can imagine when you're taking out $1 billion of loans to build a building, the 0.1% difference in interest rate is a lot of money on the table. And so I think the next movement is really about building this whole ecosystem which reward sustainable behaviors, not penalize it, but reward it over long term, and making sure that there's credible accountability in place. So it's not only a gimmick, it's not only greenwashing, but it's really about encouraging key decision makers to be making intentional investment in the right areas.
And if I can just talk about one additional point, there's this group called the Breakthrough Energy Group, which was started by Bill Gates, and then they kind of pull together, a wide array of industry and kind of leaders in the space. One of the things I really like that they talk about is the green premium, and they talk about ultimately how there's a premium price today for purchasing electricity, clean electricity, for clean transport, clean manufacturing, clean agriculture, and I think that price is shrinking. And as that price continues to shrink, there's going to be massive opportunities. I think in certain industries, it's kind of already happened, right? So if you think about, I don't know, like air conditioning, there is opportunities to take and use alternate coolants at competitive prices, but a lot of other industries, there's still that premium. So I think long term, as that gap closes, there's massive scope and massive opportunity, and it's already starting to happen in a few industries.
Natalie, if you don't mind me segueing to one of the audience questions, so Tack
Please
Lee
do.
asked the question, what is the cost of an entertainer versus a diesel generator? So I think just to latch on to Manav's point, here in Hong Kong, we are actually cheaper than a diesel generator. So using a battery provides economic savings. And like I said, a lot of construction companies do the statutory minimum when it comes to environmental protection. There are some exceptions to that. There are some construction companies that really take it very, very, very seriously, but a lot of them are still picking this up. So a very big incentive for using our products is you save money at the end of the day. If you don't care about the environment, I would imagine you would care about money as a business, in addition to the fact that there's actually less work to use our products, and the fact that they're quieter, meaning you can actually have a longer construction site, and they're smaller, so you have less space taken up. So I mean, it'd be pretty crazy not to use our products generally in the construction sector if you're in the construction sector in Hong Kong.
Definitely. And thank you so much for jumping into the audience Q&A, Brandon, because here I also want to chat a little bit about, like all of these amazing success stories you've each spoken about, they have, we can really look to them as case studies for how can we scale these things that have worked. But at the same time, when we think about businesses, startups in this space, I'm sure you've experienced this. It hasn't been the most smooth journey, right? So here I want to look at one audience member's question, which is, what are your perspectives on the biggest hurdles you all faced as a startup? Christina, would you like to share?
Yeah, there's so many. I guess there's so many, but I think one thing that I really look for and really grateful for is finding the right people, the right team member in a company. And as you find the right people, how do you bring them together, motivate them, and encourage them, even when there are setbacks? So I think that is definitely one of the most rewarding, is also the most challenging part of building a startup when you're actually competing in the same talent pool with multinational companies. So how do your technology, your vision, attract people of the same, or of an even higher caliber to join you? So I think that is definitely one of the most challenging, but also the most rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Christina that talent is the most important thing for any company, and getting really good talent. So I won't talk about that because Christina has, but I think that another thing that's really, really important is the corporates in Hong Kong are incredibly influential, and getting the right type of corporate that understands that they're working with a startup company but can create incredible change in their industry. I think that's incredibly important, and finding that corporate, I think it's getting easier. A lot of the corporates are jumping on the startup sort of bandwagon, so to speak. But certainly when we first started off, there was why would I want to work with a startup company? There's that old adage, no one ever got fired for buying IBM. So I think it's getting over that. If corporates can get over that and take a look at what these startup companies are doing, because there's, like Manav said, there's a lot of very, very, very interesting things out there, and give these startup companies a chance, as Gammon did for us. They took a bet on us, and it's worked out very well symbiotically for both AMPS and for Gammon.
I think it's a really important point, because one of the biggest challenges for any as Christina mentioned, bringing a team together is hard. Let alone trying to get them motivated around a concept and an idea, and hopefully you can find kind of mission melding, motivation and alignment. But if you can't afford the costs, which is usually tough, especially in a expensive market like Hong Kong, it's challenging, right? Because people have day-to-day costs, lives, and other things to take care of. I think one of the things I mentioned earlier is grants, and you can't build a business off grants. However, I think by permitting more grants to flow and improving the risk, reducing the risk for VCs, and thus reducing also the risk for individuals to get involved with startups, by permitting the right flow of money into their businesses, into important businesses, I think it's critical. Like when we go set up in Poland, every dollar we put in, the government gives us 8. When we set up in multiple markets around the world, every dollar we invest, there's risk capital on the government side that's basically offsetting the risk of investing into early to late stage ventures. So I think as a team, also one of the challenges in building a business is finding different and alternate growth strategies or financing strategies. Looking at licensing, looking at corporates, looking at ways to build ventures within corporates, working and connecting with manufacturers who help offset costs, plugging in, working with utility providers, and so forth. So I think, there's a whole range of things that need to happen here in order to this, for more companies to be born.
Definitely. And thinking across this whole range of things that need to happen, I also want to point to an audience question about building coalitions, right? So the audience has said, all the panelists here operate outside the regulatory space, and you can't run a business relying entirely on that, as Brandon has said. But without standardized regulation at the same time, we won't be able to get to net zero quickly enough. So how can we work together to build the coalitions needed to push policy forward?
I will comment on that, because there's actually something happening within the construction sector right now. I can't speak too much about it, but it all boils down to what Christina alluded to earlier, which is incentivizing. Look, people are going to take the path of least resistance. That's how humans are, and that's how organizations work. So if you can make the path of least resistance or the path of maximum profit or lowest financing cost, the greenest option, that's the path they're going to take. So there's something that's going to be that's happening. It's going to be announced soon here in Hong Kong. That's very, very exciting within the construction sector. Yeah, I've got to shut up now.
Yeah, I agree with Brendan. I think we need and I agree with the audience opinion as well. We definitely need a coalition because regulators usually are very risk adverse, and they won't run ahead of the market. As in, if there is no real case study, actual implementation that has proved that this technology or this new way of doing things work, they will be very, very hesitant, if not impossible, to establish any sorts of standards. So I think it's the entrepreneur, is the corporate's responsibility to run ahead of the market regulation and to prove that, hey, this works. It's, as Brendan said, it's better, it's cheaper, it's cleaner, it makes sense for everyone. So that actually helps the regulators to make standard policies because there are actual case studies backing it up. And I think the voice of each citizen is very, very important. Do not ignore the many surveys or the consultations that policies have. They are actually mandated to factor these opinions in. So do make your voices heard. Do put in your opinions because there is always like an independent assessor to look at all these opinions. And if the number of opinions are sufficient, they will have to consider these opinions.
And Manav,
one thing I want to say to that is just because it relates to civic exchange, which is look at the Fair Winds Charter and how that happened, right? Which is look at how civic exchange got the marine industry and how legislation got passed around that in order to get the marine industry to clean up, the shipping industry to clean up in terms of their use of fuels whenever they're berthing. So I think the Fair Winds Charter is a very good case study there for how industry led and then policy and regulation and legislation followed.
Yep.
Sorry, I interrupted you, Manav.
I didn't have much more to say, but I think it's just doing the work. And when we first moved here in 2014, we worked very closely, wrote white papers, published stuff, presented to the government, presented to different groups, and tried to talk about the importance of investing in IoT, which we believed were the ability to dig data wells and gather data, which would help us understand our world better through consumer as well as enterprise solutions. Nothing really happened for a very long time. We fast forward now 5 years later, and Cyberport, Hong Kong Science Park, all the big groups are putting more of their investments around IoT, robotics and drones. There's a lot of good case studies now coming out of Hong Kong. Financial policies or budgets are supporting this type of stuff. I think it's just about doing the work and trying to thus push and create more awareness, and thus the regulators will jump on board. It's usually hard to do it the other way around. I think if there's a model to follow, the EU Green Deal or the EU format, which is really well drafted, bipartisan across all the different EU countries, is a really good model to look at, and is being supported with financial capital, resources, enablement, etc. And I think that's something that could be a model to apply. I know Hong Kong has built out its 2017. I think they put out a policy under the previous leadership. I don't know how that's being rolled out. And, that's something I guess we're learning and watching.
Certainly. And going back to the Green New Deal, we actually had another TEDxCivic exchange talk who talked about this. How can we build an Asian Green New Deal? And it is especially conversations like these that we hope will help to build coalitions and really push things forward. And now, Manav, I would also like to ask you, with your perspective in working with different verticals, different companies, Tim from the audience has asked, do you think the biggest change for carbon reduction will come from a B2B or B2C approach for a startup?
I think there's magnitudes of scale on the B2B side. Enterprise, applications have significantly larger impact potential, distribution potential. Again, not saying that consumer products do not in any form or manner, and not saying that consumers cannot drive and demand that change. And I think they absolutely should. I think if we were, however, to invest into a consumer application or an enterprise application, we would invest in the enterprise application because there's just more potential. But there may be a B2B2C type application. So, yeah. If I think about plant-based meats, I keep going back to it. We look at plant or animals as like the fossils, and we're now investing in the renewables, which are the plant-based meats. And there's massive change happening on the plant-based consumer side. They're like the gateway drugs. They're creating the awareness. They are helping educate and create awareness around the fact that there is more healthy, sustainable alternates. At the same time, we're investing on the picks and shovels side with all the enterprise applications, the platforms, the solutions that can scale that. So I think it's a little bit of both, and it depends on the industry.
Christina and Brandon, what are your thoughts on grassroots bottom-up versus top-down change?
Yeah, I think my personal take is that it's easier to survive as a B2B in Hong Kong, particularly. But the scale, if you look at all the largest company around the world, Facebook, Google, Amazon, Uber, Airbnb, they're all B2C companies. And that's because for a B2C company, they don't need to deal with the individual customization that B2B customers usually require. And so there is tremendous scalability in B2C. However, the survival rate of B2C company is also very low because they need to burn a lot of cash in order to reach a massive enough customer base to make sense on the heavy development costs that they put in building a platform or building a service. So I think we, as cliche as it sounds, we need both. We need, B2C companies. We also need B2B companies to change things for better.
I only know B2B. I'm not a B2C guy. But I agree with Christina in that it almost doesn't matter whether the bigger impact is in the B2B space or the B2C space, because we're so far off the mark where we need to be that we just need everyone to do their part. It almost doesn't matter whether it's B2B or B2C. Everyone's got to chip in, because if we only did B2C, we're not going to get there. Or B2B,
Definitely.
we're not going to get there.
Yeah. And now I would like to kind of elevate our conversation from the local to the global. So thinking about the potential of connecting these local Hong Kong solutions into global trends and opportunities. And I've actually saved Jane's question for last, which is, what is the potential for Hong Kong to become the global pioneer or leader of green energy innovations?
I have a strong view on that, so if you don't mind me jumping in.
Please.
Hong Kong has certain industries that are world-class. I'm thinking the banking and financial services sector, logistics, public transportation, construction and property, retail. Hong Kong truly is world-class in these areas. So if it's about taking these technologies and applying them in the context of energy, it would be through, I would think it would be through those channels where you would naturally see opportunities for Hong Kong companies to develop and grow very globally competitive technologies. And I think it's piggybacking off the areas that Hong Kong is and has always been world class in, and it's these sectors. I mean, yeah. You're not gonna. I mean, just to make a point, I'm from Brunei originally. Brunei is huge on oil and gas, but I really don't think a Hong Kong company, startup company, is gonna do all that great in the oil and gas sector. It wouldn't, it's not something I would naturally think of, kind of thing, for example, right?
I think it's really interesting what Brendan said, because I think, everyone needs to play to their strengths, and, maybe there is crazy radical type, ideas that can be adopted by existing sectors. Like if the logistics and trade industry, for example, adopted a practice, since such large volumes of trade still go through Hong Kong, from China, Hong Kong, and out, to say that we will only provide tax benefits or reduce tax subsidies or trade subsidies if the produce and the products being imported or exported from this part of the world are green in nature, or have some sort of governance in nature. Very complex perhaps to adopt, maybe not. But again, that's playing to one of the outlets potentially here. Maybe there's other things like that. Maybe in the financial markets, there's opportunities to promote and market and for example, Hong Kong allows biotech companies to list pre-revenue. It's one of the only markets in the world that you can list in the IPO markets pre-revenue, and they permit you to access the Hong Kong FDA market to plug into China. So maybe there's some interesting avenues on that front, and maybe some radical thinking. I don't think there's any silver bullets in any form or manner, but I think there's some interesting thoughts around leveraging the strengths and playing to Hong Kong's strengths.
Yep, definitely. I agree with Manav and Brendan. As we're talking about energy, I think a fact about the grid in Hong Kong is extremely profitable. Imagine Hong Kong's grid versus the US, right? Suburbs. It's so vast, it's so spread out that you maybe have 100 households within a kilometer square, and that's considered decent. In Hong Kong, you have thousands, if not millions of households in a very small, dense pocket. And so any upgrades that you do to the grid, you basically rip immediate benefit. And that's the beauty of our city, because it's so efficient, it's so packed, it's so dense. That's why it's one of the most profitable grid in the world. Because of that, we should be intentional in upgrading and in building out green infrastructure, different sorts of innovations, program and technology and data around it, because Hong Kong you will see such an efficient turnaround of the results and your investment, because it's such a built up city. Every dollar that you invest in the infrastructure will have, especially on the grid side, right? Because of that, the density that we have. When a lot of grid operators near to bankruptcy in the US, the grid in Hong Kong has been extremely reliable. And so that's why I think we definitely should capitalize on what we have and be confident that we will be able to showcase and export innovations examples to the rest of the world.
Definitely. And this conversation has made me so optimistic about not just solutions to climate change in general, but also the potential and immense opportunity for Hong Kong to really take the lead in this, as all of you have said. And now I'm just thinking, going along with this theme of optimism, what is one thing you're most optimistic about in this space?
I guess I'm optimistic about the fact that a lot of people are starting to come together. The awareness is growing. There's just tremendous, movement and energy and excitement. There's a lot of things to be not optimistic about as well, but on the flip side, I think if we stay positive, there's definitely a lot of awareness. There's more awareness. There's more money going into green business, impact-driven businesses than ever before. We're signatories to the UN PRI, which is the Principles of Responsible Investment. The volume of PRI investors or impact investors has grown exponentially year on year. All the big groups are also starting to understand, and there's the governance policies also, which I think were very poor before or not clear, are getting a lot more refined in terms of what to look for. What does sustainability mean, and what are the facets of it? we're always challenging, our teams to think through holistic and entire solutions, and I think that's starting to happen. So if you're building a plant-based milk, don't sell it, in a plastic container, and then you kind of address half of the problem, and then you put it in plastic or container wrapped in plastic with a plastic straw. So I think there's a lot of awareness around the entirety of these solutions as well. So I guess I'm happy there's a large information flow, and I hope we can continue to navigate it.
The thing I'm really optimistic about this, because I believe through a combination of advocacy, awareness, and technology, the path of least resistance is increasingly becoming the cleanest, by coincidence happens to be the cleanest path. And I can just cite you numerous examples. Solar is now officially the cheapest source of energy in history. It's cheaper than the operating cost. Forget about the build cost, right? The operating cost of a coal-fired power plant. Norway, with its $1 trillion sovereign wealth fund, has made a commitment to no longer invest in the oil and gas industry, a country that has made all its wealth in the oil and gas sector, or a huge part of it. BlackRock, the world's largest money managers with trillions of dollars of assets under management, will be divesting away from the oil and gas and investing in renewables. So increasingly, like I said, through a combination of awareness, through a combination of advocacy, through the progress of technology, the cleanest path is increasingly becoming the path of least resistance. And that's why I'm incredibly optimistic that things will move way quicker than any of us anticipate in terms of how quickly the world moves toward renewable energy and towards sustainable solution.
Yep, I can't agree more. I think I'm very optimistic because I see successful startup like Brandon's Amped Energy creating systematic change in the construction industry, which has, to be honest, is one of the hardest industry to break through. If I've ever dealt with a construction company, it's extremely, extremely tough. And being able to see success and breakthrough in such a hard industry to enter, I mean, there's so much, I mean, actions and case studies speaks louder than any words or theory. So the actual tractions that has been taking place, I think, says so much more. And same with Manav, with Brinc, really promoting startups and bringing in more energy, partnering up with traditional corporations and disrupting what traditional corporations are doing. I think these are all really encouraging, not only words, but actual tractions that have been made. So we might not be able to make headlines every day, right? But I think it's these kind of day-to-day chipping in, effort more than words, which is actually making the change that we hope to. And I think it's about living the change that we want to, and throwing ourselves into the change that we want to see, not complaining, but like constructively, chipping in, not giving up, collaborating. And so I think that is the hope that we've been seeing. And with I think any long-term story, it's the battle has been won, as in people who do the right thing will run, will continue to run the race, and they will win at the end. So I believe that the battle of clean energy is already won. It's a matter of whether you join it or you decided not to join it or not. And throwing something in there is, like 10 years ago, we've been thinking that nuclear is the way to solve the world's energy. But today, nuclear is no longer mentioned actually in a lot of national plans, but replacing that, it's new form of energy like hydrogen, which is truly, zero carbon, and you won't create a hazardous waste. It's basically water. So I think it's up to every one of us to express support, to research and to really look into these areas and be supportive of adopting these policies. Countries like Australia, They have also set up national plans to adopt hydrogen, and Australia is known as a country to export their natural resources, mining. But now they know, oh, it's actually not about exporting our exhaustible resources anymore. It's about converting maybe their solar energy into hydrogen fuel that can be exported to around the world. So I think there's so much improvement in the business side and also in the technology side that we should celebrate and continue to support.
Christina's
so
comment.
much. Yeah.
Sorry, just Christina's comment reminded me of a quote that was being shared around in one of our groups. It was from Martin Luther King, and it said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So, it just takes some time, and I think it's super exciting with everything that's happening that we're continuing to bend to the right direction. Sorry, I just wanted to add that in.
No, this is so uplifting, and thank you all three of you, because I feel like I should just listen to this recording of that segment and listen to it every day before I go to work, just to keep me optimistic about life. So thank you so much, Christina, Brandon, Manav, for this conversation today. It was not only uplifting and inspiring, but also full of case studies and solutions that have succeeded, which give us hope, and also at the same time point to where we can scale, where we can accelerate these changes towards disrupting climate change. So thank you so much once again to all three of you. We barely scratched the surface today. To anyone listening here, if you would like to contact our speakers, I'm sure they would be very happy to chat more or collaborate, building coalitions together. So once again, thank you so much to TEDxCivic Exchange. Thank you to Global Shapers Hong Kong Hub, Sustain Hong Kong, who's hosting this in collaboration. And again, thank you so much, Brandon, Christina, Manav, for your time and the insightful conversation. Thank you.
Lovely being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.